So I've just moved from the UK to the west coast of Canada, literally right next to the Pacific Ocean. One thing that I've been worried about is how my guitar strings are going to perform, whether the increase of humidity and the salty sea air is going to cause them to rust and break a lot quicker. I've picked up a pack of coated guitar strings, which are obviously meant to last a lot longer. I thought now's a really good opportunity to actually test just how they compare to non-coated guitar strings. So I'm going to run a test over the next few months. I'm going to restring one of my guitars with these coated strings and another with non-coated strings. And I'm just going to see how they compare to each other. So I'm going to restring my guitars now, and I'll see you in a couple of months. Okay, so that was 3 months ago, and I have noticed a clear difference between coated and uncoated strings, and not just how long they last. But first, what are coated guitar strings? Well, they're just a regular guitar string that's been covered in a really thin layer of basically plastic. And Dario says that this coating is about 10 times thinner than a human hair. So it's really thin. And what this does is it protects the metal string underneath from things like moisture and dirt that over time lead to your string sounding bad, feeling harder to play, eventually rusting and breaking. And that can come from your hands when you sweat while playing, or just the general environment, like I said earlier. So the idea is that coated strings are meant to last longer than regular uncoated strings. So what did I find over those 3 months? Well, the first thing I noticed is how different the strings feel. The coated strings feel much smoother, and they don't have as much of a squeak when you move position. But they do feel slightly different, especially when bending. It's not a massive difference, but I did notice it the longer that I played. They also sound a bit different as well. The coated strings have a little less brightness and a little less resonance than the uncoated strings, so they don't cut through as much. But their sound doesn't change as much over time compared to uncoated strings. So when you restring your guitar with uncoated strings, it sounds very bright to start with, then they settle in, and then it dulls off over time. Whereas with coated strings, the sound's been pretty consistent since I installed them on my guitar. It doesn't have that big drop off like the uncoated strings do. The other difference that you might notice between them is the price, because coated strings are more expensive than uncoated strings. Not by a crazy amount, but enough that if you're restringing your guitar often, it will add up if you're using coated strings. But if you find yourself burning through strings quite quickly because of sweat or the environment, then it could be worth picking up a pack and getting some extra longevity out of your strings and maybe saving some money in the long run. And longevity is the main thing when it comes to coated and uncoated strings. And I have definitely noticed that coated strings do last longer than uncoated strings. At least from my small test. The uncoated strings already have that grainy feel to them, that tarnished look as well, so I know that they're going to need changing basically as soon as I've done with this video. Whereas the coated strings, they still have that smoothness to them, and it feels like they've got plenty of life left. There is some wear towards the bridge where I think I've worn away some of the coating by picking quite hard, but as I said, they still feel smooth up and down the neck, and it still feels like I can get a few more months out of them. In fact, what I'll do is I'll drop a comment down below when I have to change them out. So with all that said, where do I land on coated versus uncoated strings? Well, even though they don't last as long, I'm going to stick with uncoated strings for a couple of reasons. The biggest one is that I actually prefer changing my strings out regularly because I like to fully clean my guitar and set it up as well. And even though the strings themselves last longer, you're still transferring sweat and grime onto the fretboard when you're playing with coated strings. So I'd need to remove the strings anyway to properly clean the fretboard. So I might as well just use uncoated strings. They also feel a little bit lighter despite being the same thickness. So there's less resistance on my hand when I'm playing. Feels a little bit easier, and it feels a bit more familiar as well. They also have a brighter sound compared to coated strings, like I said. It's not a massive difference. You could probably get around it by bumping up the treble on your amp a little bit, but I just like how naturally bright these sound, and I like that new string chiminess. The final reason, and this might change in the future, but there's a lot more options when it comes to uncoated strings. So with coated strings, there's a few different gauges available, and there are quite a few different options. That is really good. But with uncoated strings, you've got all the different gauges, you've got mixed hybrid gauges, you've also got different materials as well, which all plays a part in how the string feels and how it sounds. Like I said, there's probably going to be more options for the future with coated strings, but right now, just the variety that you can get from uncoated strings gives it an edge for me. But that's just where I am right now. For me, coated strings really come into their own for longer periods between playing a guitar. So if I have something that I'm maybe not touching as much, then I can put coated strings on it and it's not going to have that grime buildup, and it's also not going to tarnish from the environment. So I think that's a really good use case for them. But I definitely recommend giving it a try for yourself and maybe running your own tests and let me know how you get on in the comments down below. But I hope this video has given you a better understanding on the difference between coated and uncoated strings. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments below and I'll do my best to help. Otherwise, thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.